Hi there, I'm Eitan, and welcome back to the Wix Wiz. In this video, we are going to be showing how to create a price range filter for data that is displayed in a repeater, both using inputs and a price range slider. So if you want to learn how to do all that and more, let's get started. So today's video is actually straight from the suggest and vote section on the YouTube page of the Wix Wiz website. And this is a place where our viewers can come and suggest different video ideas and vote on the topics that they think would make the best tutorial. And here we're going to be doing this top and most upvoted suggestion, which is advanced filters and specifically how to create a price filter for a repeater that is displaying data from a collection. And basically, we're going to allow the user to input a minimum and maximum price and then filter the data based on that. And we're going to be doing it in two ways. So here you can see that I already have some stuff set up here. So we have two inputs for the minimum price and the maximum price. And we're also going to be showing how to do it with this range slider element, which allows the user kind of a slightly more visual way of selecting the minimum range and upper end of the range. Here under that, I've set up a very basic repeater, and I've added some text elements which are going to display our data. And what we're going to be doing is making a car listing directory. And for that, I've already set up the collection here in the CMS. So you'll see that I have this collection cars. And if I go in to just take a peek, you'll see that we have some different data points. And this is all mock data that I created through a mock data website. And specifically, and most importantly, we have the price here, which is set to be a number type field. Okay, and that's important here for the filtering because we won't be able to implement this kind of filter with a text field. It has to be a number field. And this doesn't have to be necessarily a price. I mean, you could implement this same concept for any kind of number field that you have. For example, we could do the same thing for this model year that we have here, and we could do the same thing for somebody's age, etc. It doesn't really matter what the data is, it just matters the type of the data and that it's a number type. So that's just giving you a peek here into the data. And the first thing that we're going to do is set up the connection between our collection and our repeater using the Wix Data API. Okay, so here I am in the page IDE, and what we're going to be doing is using Wix Query in order to query the data from the collection, and then using the repeater's onItemReady to display that data in the repeater. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a function. So let me get rid of all this boilerplate text here. And I'm going to create a function here under my onReady. And it's going to be an asynchronous function, okay, because we're fetching data from the collection. And I'm going to call it populate cars repeater. And what this function is going to do is it's going to query the collection. So for that, we're going to need to import Wix data from Wix data. And we're going to run a query over here. So const cars query result equals to await Wix data dot query. And here we need the collection ID. So I remember that it's called cars, but if you want to double check, you can go here to databases and just copy over the collection ID from right over here. And then we're going to write find. Okay, so a very, very simple data query. And if you don't really understand what I'm doing here, and the same goes for what we're going to do later on in terms of setting up the repeater, I do recommend either checking out some of the other tutorials on this channel, or you can also head over to Udemy, where I have now published my Velo for Beginners course. And this course really takes you through everything you need to know to get started on Velo from the very, very basics. You don't need any prior knowledge in JavaScript. You do need some familiarity with Wix. So if you're new to the Wix platform, it might not be for you. But if you know Wix and you're interested in learning Velo and how to do stuff like this in a very thorough and basic way, then you can go ahead and check out that course. And now back to what we were talking about. So we set up our query result. And in order to get specifically the cars, what we're going to do is we're going to say const cars equals to cars query result dot items. Okay, and this is going to give us essentially an array of objects with all of the car data. And the last thing we need to do is just assign this car data to our repeater. So I'm going to select the repeater. Now I'm selecting the container, and now I selected the repeater. And if I open up the properties and events panel here, then I'll just call this cars repeater. And then I can select it here in my code, cars repeater dot data equals cars. Okay, so that should be enough in order to assign the cars data to the repeater. But before it actually displays, we're going to need to set up the onItem ready for the repeater. So I'm going to create another function, set up repeater, cars repeater, just in case you might have another repeater on your page. Set up cars repeater, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the repeater. So cars repeater dot onItem ready, and this takes several parameters. So one is going to be item, and the other is item data. And again, I'm not going in depth here because I do have other resources which explain each of these individual elements more in depth. And here what we're going to do is we're going to select each of these different elements inside of each item of the repeater, and we're going to assign specific data to them. So let's go ahead and do the naming. So I'm going to select this, and this is going to be the make, and this is going to be the model year. So it's going to be also model and also year. And this is going to be the VIN. And this is going to be the price. Awesome. Let me go ahead and zoom right back in there. And we can get rid of this panel. Whoops. And now we can select each of the items. So we have here $item, and we have the make, and .text equals. I'm going to go ahead and copy paste this for all of our different items in a very ugly manner. Okay, there we go. Formatting. Okay, so here we have model and year, and here we have the VIN, and last but not least, the price. Okay, and the make is going to be equal to item data dot make. Okay, and you can see all of these fields here inside of databases. So I'm basically mapping out each of these individual fields into my different text elements in the repeater. So this is just going to be the make. And for the model year, I'll use a template literal. And here I'll have item data dot model. And then after that, we'll put the year. You can also switch it around. I don't know. And I'm not big into cars, so I don't know what would be the most correct way to display it, but maybe with a comma. I don't know. Let's say item data dot year. And after that, we're going to have the VIN. Okay, so that's going to be item data dot VIN. And here we're going to have the price. So I'm actually going to make a template literal here as well. And I'm going to assume that the prices are in dollars. So I'm going to have a dollar sign, and then I'm going to have the item data dot price. Okay. And this is pretty much all we need. And now we just need to run these two functions inside of our onReady. So let's say set up cars repeater, and then I'm going to populate cars repeater, and I'm going to add here as well just the fact that we're going to expand this repeater after the data is assigned. So actually that won't be here. My bad, my bad. It's going to be in the other function after we assign the data. Okay, so here we assign the data, and here we expand it, and we're going to make this collapsed by default. So collapsed means that essentially it's not displaying on our screen. And I'm going to go ahead and click preview, zoom out a little bit. Awesome. So I see that it's basically working. I don't see, okay, so here I don't see the year and I don't see the VIN. So that means that I made some mistake in terms of the naming of those two. So let's go back to databases, cars. Okay, so VIN, it's lowercase actually. Okay, and here I made it uppercase by accident. So let me change that. Let me zoom in a little bit. So this VIN needs to be lowercase. And don't don't get discouraged if this happens to you as well. It's nearly impossible to write code that works perfectly the first time. You're always going to have kind of an iteration of writing some code, testing, and debugging. So here we have the VIN, we fixed that, and now we need to fix the year. Okay, so it's model year. Okay, you see here the name is model year and not just year like I put here. So it's model year. Okay, awesome. And now if we go back into preview mode just to double check, now we see our VIN and we see the price and we see the year. Awesome. Okay, so everything seems to be working. And now we can move on to the next step, which is actually to set up our price filters. Okay, so in order to set up our price filter, what we're going to be using is the greater than filter and the less than filter. You could also do the greater and equals or less and equals filter depending on what you're going for. But basically this will allow us to set our query so it only returns items that fit within our price range. And as we implement it, I think it will become a little more clear. And in order to do so, I'm going to set up a new function right under our populate cars repeater function. So async function. And this will be filter by price. You could even say filter cars by price, just to be a little more clear. And what we're going to do here is we're going to get our min range, like minimum price and maximum price, and create a new query based on those filters. So let's say const max, let's start with min price equals 2. And for that, we're going to need this input over here. So I'm going to rename this input to something that makes sense. So we'll make this max price input. Sorry, this was min. What's going on with me today? Min price input, and this one is going to be max price input. Max price input. And here we can now select that element in the code. So that's going to be min price input dot value. And const max price is going to be max price input dot value. Awesome. So now that we have those two prices, we can set up our queries. So let's say const min price query will be equal to Wix data dot query, and we're going to be querying the cars collection. And we're going to be looking for greater than. We could also do greater or equals to. Okay, actually greater and equals to might make a little more sense. Greater or equals to. And then we're going to specify the property name. So we're going to say the price. And it should be greater or equal to the min price. Okay, and that's going to be one of our queries. And then we're going to say const max price query equals to Wix data. So very similar, just with the max price query cars dot less or equals to, and then we're going to have price, and we're going to have the max price. And then, so one more thing that we're going to want to do here before I forget is verify that these values are numbers. So even though I set up the input here to be a number input, okay, you can maybe see it kind of peeking there out of the side. Here inside of the data, we want to make sure that Wix isn't by any chance sending us this value as a string, which it often does for the different inputs. So in order to make sure that we have all the right data types, I'm just going to wrap this value inside of a number. Okay, and this is a JavaScript method that will just convert a string, if it's a string, into a number. Because here, if we put a string instead of a number, this query is not really going to work very well. So now that we have that set up, I'm going to set up our general query. And this is the query that we're going to conditionally append our other queries to if we have a min price and max price value. So I'm going to say here, let cars query equal to Wix data dot query cars. Okay, so very basic. And now we can go on to conditionally append our other two queries. And this is going to be conditional on the fact that we have a min price and a max price. So I'm going to say here, if min price is bigger or equal to 0, okay, and this will only be true if we actually have something input into the min price. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say cars query equals to cars query dot and I'm going to append here the min price query. Okay, and by using the and method here, what we're doing is we're assuring that our query is restrictive and not inclusive. Okay, because basically we want to do is restrict it so that's only cars between these two and not also cars that are above the min price and also cars that are below the upper price, because then we'll have essentially all the cars, if that makes sense. So here we conditionally appended this min price query, and we're going to do the same thing for our max price. If it is bigger or equal to 0, then I'm going to say that cars query equals to cars query dot and max price query. And the last thing we're going to do is actually run our query. So we're going to say const cars query result equals to await cars query dot find. And then we're going to have const cars, so very similar to what we did before. Cars query result dot items, and then we're going to assign the data to the repeater. So cars repeater dot data equals to cars. Awesome. So now that we set up this function, we're going to do some testing soon. And I just want to actually append this, bind this function to an event listener for our inputs. So basically, there are different ways that you can handle this. You could also decide to do it by setting up a search button, for example, and only running this function once somebody clicks search. I'm going to be setting it up so that once one of these two inputs is changed, it will run the function. So I'm going to set up those event listeners here. So I'm going to say here min price input, and I'm going to select the max price input as well. And I'm going to say dot on change. And what we're going to do here is run the filter by cars price. Filter by cars. Cars by price. Okay. I'm feeling pretty good about this. So let's give it a spin. So I'm going to go into preview mode. Let me zoom out. Go into preview mode. Awesome. So now we see all the cars. So let me try and set a min price of 2,000. And as soon as I click outside, it'll run the on change. Whoops. Okay, so it seems like it ran, but for some reason I didn't get any cars back, which is a little disappointing. Let me try changing it to 1,000. No joy. So now we enter the debugging stage. So I'm going to head back into the editor. And what we're going to do here, whoops, is add some console logs. And this is a way for us to view our data in the developer logs as we are testing it out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say console.log range, and I'm going to have here the min price and the max price. And then I'm going to write over here console.log appending min price query. And I'm going to set up something similar over here for the max price query. And here I'm just going to log console.log. Let's log the query results. Whoops. So console.log cars query results and cars query results. Okay, so that should be enough to kind of give us an idea of what's going on and why this might not be working. So let's head back into preview mode. And awesome. So let's try this again. So I'm going to set this to 200. And I'm going to click outside. Awesome. So the range is 2000. Oh, 2000 and 0. Ah, okay, interesting. So apparently, if it's undefined, it sets it to be 0. Okay, that's what I'm seeing here at least. Awesome. So that explains it. So let's go back to the editor. And we need to figure this out. So what I'm going to do is instead of turning it into a number over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this around a bit. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can do here. Okay, we could set the max price so that it can't be 0. Okay, let's set the max price so that it can't be 0. That, I think, should solve our problem. So like a lot of things in coding, there's more than one way to solve a problem. Either we could play around with the data types and only convert it to a number later on, or we can try and tackle it like this, because in this specific case, the max price will have to be over 0 for this to work. So let me try that again. And I'm going to go into preview mode. And let's try setting the min price to 2000. And now it's working. Okay, so it's only displaying cars over 2000. And here, if I set this now, let's say the upper range to 3000, then we can see it's only displaying cars that are between 2000 and 3000. And this little error that we had before actually highlights another edge case that we need to think of, and that is that we don't want people to be able to set the max range to be, let's say, under the min range or the other way around. So we're going to want to set up a function that prevents something like that. So let's say, I think we could do that with using the input's different properties. So let's go over here. And if we open up the documentation here for text input, then we can see here that we can set max. So sets or gets the maximum value for a text input element. Okay, so what we can do actually is just use this in order to set those upper and lower limits after we make a change to one of the inputs. So what I'm going to do here is that after we set a min price and a max price, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that the min price input dot max should be equal to max price, And the, but will that make sense if it's 0? Let's say if max price is bigger than 0, and we'll say if min price is bigger than 0, then our max price input dot min will be equal to min price. So this if basically tries to detect and see if we've made any change to those inputs. So if we haven't made a change, then these lines won't fire off. Let's try that out. So let's go into preview mode. And okay, so here I'm going to set, let's say, a min price of 1,000. And okay, so it gave me the error here for the max price. Okay, back to editor. Let's try this as well. If max price is bigger than 0. I think that's the logic that I want. Let me go back into preview mode. So let's see, I'll set this to 1,000. Okay, I don't have any errors, and my filter is working. Set it to 2,000, let's say. Yeah, okay, everything looks in order. And now I'm going to try and set my max price to 1,000. So let's try 1,000, and you see that it's giving us an error. And we can deal with this in different ways, like to prevent somebody from actually putting something that's lower than the min range. So we can like have an error message here or something like that. But basically, I just want to highlight that this is something that we need to think about. So let's say if this is 1,000 here, and I try to set 2,000 over here, let's see what happens. Yeah, so it gives us an error again. Okay, so just some kind of indication that something is going wrong here. And for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to leave it at that. And now the next thing we're going to do is head over to this price range slider and show how to set up the same concept using this slider. So for the slider, our filter cars by price function is actually going to be super similar. Really the only thing that we're going to be changing here is how we get the min price and how we get the max price. And instead of getting these from the min price input and the max price input, we are going to be getting them from the slider. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and comment out these 4 lines that apply specifically to the inputs. And I'm going to set up some new logic which is going to get our min price and max price. And before I do that, I'm just going to rename this range slider to be the price range slider, just so we know which range slider we're talking about. And now I am going to tap into it into my code. So we're going to define the min price. Let me close this panel just so you can see a little better. The min price is going to be number, and we're going to select our slider. So that's going to be the price range slider. And we're going to be tapping into the min property. And yeah, so that's for the min price, and the max price is going to be super similar, just with max. So I'm going to copy it over and just change this to max, and this to max as well. And here with the slider, we don't really have to deal with this issue because I'm pretty sure that the UX of the slider doesn't let you kind of overlap those two min and max kind of selectors. So we don't really have to deal with this situation where the min will be over the max and the max will be under the min, etc. So that is pretty much what we need to do. And now we just need to assign this function, bind it to the onChange for our slider instead of the inputs. So I'm going to select our slider over here, price range slider, price range slider dot onChange. And here we can say filter, whoops, what happened to my parentheses? Filter cars by price. And now let's go and check this out in preview mode. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and, let's say, change this to 4,613, and let's move this to 2,514.2. Nothing happened. So let's take a look at, okay, so 0, okay, so I think I read the documentation wrong actually. And here, this min and max is not the actual selected max and min value, it is the actual minimum and maximum of the slider. So what we're going to want to get actually is probably something else. Let's see if there's a value property. Value. Value. What would the value of this? So this seems to be a case where the documentation might not be so awesome. Let me see. Okay, so this requires some work on our part. So let me go here back into the editor. And what I'm going to do is here, I'm going to add a log. So console.log slider value. And I'm going to log the price range slider.value. And let's see what that property looks like. So I'm going to go into preview mode. And let's try changing this. And the slider value. Okay. So the slider value comes back as an array, where it seems like the first item is the lower end of the range, and the second item is the upper end. So that's not such a big deal. So we just need to change out our code a little bit here. So we can get rid of this log because we understand how it works now. And here we're going to do dot value 0. And here we're going to do dot value 1. Now if we head back into preview mode, and I'll move this to, let's say, 2000. Boom. Okay, so it's only showing us cars within the range. And I'll make this smaller. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. Yeah, so if you wanted to also like display the actual range here, we could also set it up. So for example, after we make this change, it'll display the min and max here inside of these inputs. Let's set it up just because it's cool. So after we make the change, we can say min price input dot value equals to min price. And why isn't this working? Number is not assignable to type string. So we're going to here to string. And we're going to say the same thing for the max price. So max price input dot value equals to max price dot to string. And then if we go into preview mode, then when we make a change to our slider, it should display, yeah, so here it'll display the range, kind of to make it a little more visual. And you can play with the settings, I'm pretty sure, to make sure that there aren't any decimals and stuff like that. But that will conclude our tutorial. So again, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, and if you have any questions or you want to share about your project, you can comment below. If you like this video and you want to see more kind of Velo Wix related videos and tutorials like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you want a super thorough course for beginners in Velo and JavaScript, really starting from just Wix knowledge, then you can head over to Udemy. And I'll put the links kind of in the description below if you want to check out the course. And I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you next time.